I woke up punching at glass that wouldn't move, my breath turning to frost inside a cracked visor. The cryopod finally hissed open and spilled me onto a metal grate so cold it burned. I told myself it was just a bad far cycle. Then I wiped the frost off the pod beside mine and saw a skeleton tangled in the harness wires. Like the ship had forgotten to wake them. The nearest terminal flashed critical failure in red. And somewhere deep in the hull something thumped, like a heartbeat pretending to be machinery. If you want more first-hand survival logs like this, subscribe now and tell me in the comments, do you check the other pods? Or run? I'm telling you exactly what happened, from the first breath in that pod to the last thing I remember. I wish I could tell you I handled it like some trained responder. I didn't. I did what anyone does when the world stops making sense. I tried to force it back into a shape my brain could live with. I left the cryo deck because staying there meant staring at that skeleton and waiting for my own pod to decide it wanted me back. The bulkhead door was half seized, rusted so badly the manual crank felt like it was tearing my shoulders out. When it finally gave, it opened onto a corridor that looked familiar in layout and completely wrong in detail. Sector 4 was dim and foggy, my flashlight beam catching suspended dust like ash. The walls were ribbed with cable bundles that pulsed subtle, rhythmic. I stood there long enough to convince myself it was just power cycling through old conduits. But then I heard a single metallic scratch far down the intersection to my left, and the sound didn't echo like metal. It dragged, then stopped, like something noticed me noticing it. My suit ventilation was louder than my thoughts. I kept walking anyway, mag boots clanking with every step, pretending the noise was confidence. At a low vent grate, black fluid had seeped out and dried in uneven rings. When I crouched and touched it with my glove, it didn't feel like oil. It had a weird, organic sheen, like there was depth to it. The ventilation fan behind the grate stuttered once, like it didn't want to breathe. That should have been my turnaround moment. Instead, I told myself, leak. Coolant. Nothing. I kept going until the corridor widened into an airlock vestibule. Someone had dropped a heavy wrench there, industrial, scarred, familiar. I picked it up and held it tight against my chest like it could substitute for another person. The metal was colder than my gloves could mute. The bridge access was sealed off by quarantine curtains. Torn plastic sheets, stained and stiff, hanging in strips. When I pushed through them, they slapped against my helmet and shoulders, clinging for a second like damp skin. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air changes? Like the temperature isn't the only thing shifting? That's what it was like. The ship felt like it was waiting. The command bridge itself was broken open to space. Blast shields shattered, and through jagged gaps I could see the starfield, huge and indifferent. The ship was drifting. Not cruising. Not holding position. Drifting. I went straight for the captain's chair because routine is an anchor. Officers check logs. Freight officers follow procedure because procedure keeps you alive around heavy machinery and bad people. I leaned over the chair and brought up the log on a holographic display. The flight path spiraled. Not a curve, not a rot correction, a spiral, tightening in on itself like someone had been drawing circles until they forgot why. The audio file attached was corrupted. It chirped, stuttered, then spat out static that almost sounded like a voice trying to pronounce my name. I told myself the bridge took a hit. That the system corrupted in the crash or the power dip. I told myself a lot of things. Then I saw the wall. A crew member, what was left of one, was fused into the plating near the portside console. Not pinned. Not crushed. Integrated. Skin and suit material blended into steel like the ship had softened and swallowed them mid-step. The texture crawled my eyes upward, hair trapped in seams, and air half visible under a ridge of metal. Fingers flattened like they'd been pressed into hot wax. I couldn't process it cleanly. My brain kept trying to file it under accident, but accidents don't stitch people into architecture. I stumbled to the comms console anyway. Because if you can send an SOS, you can hand the problem to someone with more authority, more weapons, more anything. I started typing, and the keys depressed under my gloves like they weren't keys. Like they were soft. I pulled my hand back so fast I almost dropped the wrench. The console had a wet, sticky give to it. And the sound, this quiet squish, went straight through the helmet audio like it had permission. That was the moment denial cracked. Not fully. Not like a clean break. More like a fracture line I couldn't stop touching with my mind. The lights died in a sweep, bridge to corridor, one bank after another. For a second, I was in pure black except for the weak strobing beacon on my suit. I ran. Not because I'd seen something moving, but because I could feel the ship's attention shift toward me. The corridor swallowed the bridge behind me. My boots hit the deck too hard, too loud. And the sound of my own panic breathing became the only proof I still existed. I didn't stop until I hit the engineering deck. The scale down there is always oppressive, pipes like tree trunks, pistons bigger than a person, catwalks disappearing into shadow. Usually it's comforting. It's honest. Metal does what metal does. But the silence felt staged, like the room was holding its breath. The reactor restart lever was manual, old school, a fallback for when automation fails. I crawled under a massive gear shaft to reach the controls, suit scraping through grease and grit. Sparks fell from somewhere overhead like someone was cutting metal in the dark. I yanked the lever. The ignition flare lit my visor orange-white. For half a second, the deck looked normal again. Then the shadows moved. Not the way shadows shift when lights flicker. They slid, too deliberate, too heavy, as if something massive had passed between the flare and the far wall. Above the grating, I heard slow impacts, thuds that carry through the beams. Then a sound like clicking claws testing metal. I got behind a support pillar and made myself small. I remember thinking, very clearly, if I can't see it, it can't decide unreal. Like hiding under a blanket as a kid. A shape crossed the ceiling. Not a clean silhouette. It was biomechanical, wrong geometry, like an industrial crane learned how to grow. It moved without the usual noises of weight. That was the part that scared me most. Heavy things announced themselves. This didn't. I backed out and found a maintenance ladder. I slid down too fast, gloves burning, boots sparking against rungs. Dropping into the underbelly of the ship where the air was colder and tasted like old batteries. I needed medical supplies. If the ship was injured, maybe it injured me too. That was my logic. It sounds stupid now, but it was something I could do that wasn't wait to die. The med bay lights were on. But the room wasn't right. Surgical robots were active, arms moving with that precise, patient rhythm they use on bodies, except there was no body. They were dissecting a metal pipe as if it were bone, sawing, peeling, laying pieces out with reverence. Wet sounds where no wet should exist. I smashed a cabinet for a syringe and whatever antiseptic packs I could find. My hands were shaking so hard the glass shards stuck to my gloves like glitter. In the mirror, I saw black veins on my neck. Not bruises. Veins spreading. When I scrubbed at them, the skin underneath didn't feel like mine. It felt numb, like the nerves were being rewritten. I stumbled into the hallway and leaned against the wall for support. The wall gave. Not structurally, physically. It pulsed, soft and warm under my palm, like muscle under thin skin. I snatched my hand back and almost retched. You can handle blood. You can handle rust. But when the ship itself starts feeling alive, you realize you've been walking inside something that can decide to close. I made it to a decontamination chamber and crouched under chemical jets until I was coughing, throat raw. Clean. Sterile. Controlled. And then the alarm cleared too fast, like it was satisfied with a performance. I kept moving because the only thing worse than fear is staying still long enough to imagine what's behind you. The cargo bay doors loomed ahead, colossal, with rotating hazard lights that read biological hazard in slow, indifferent S. When the doors finally creaked open, the smell hit even through filters, metallic, wet, electric.
10,
In the center of the bay
9,
was a heart.
8,
A massive biomechanical organ, cables feeding it like arteries, beating so slow and loud I could feel it in my teeth. Metal groaned in time with it, like the ship's skeleton was sinking to a pulse that wasn't supposed to exist. I crept along the upper catwalk because being above it felt safer. And I hated myself for how quickly my brain adapted to the idea of it. I found a paper manifest clipped to a crate, actual paper. The kind you keep when you don't want data trails. Project Mimic. My hands trembled so badly the page snapped under my fingers. That was the first time I had something solid in my hands, something that proved this wasn't just panic in my head. Not a feeling. Not a shadow. Not a soft wall. A label. A human decision. And the moment I read it, the deck beneath me proved it wasn't just a project. A floor plate near the catwalk edge flexed. Split.
If you hear this,
turned
turn
into
back.
teeth.
The contamination zone
It
is
bit
active.
down on my
Magnetic
boot.
seals won't hold much
Sparks
longer.
flew.
I repeat, stay away from
I
the
screamed,
cargo.
not from pain at first, but from the betrayal of something I trusted my whole working life, the floor. I stumped, wrenched, kicked until it released with a metal crunch that sounded like chewing. I ran. I dove into a vent because vents don't have teeth. That's what I thought. The shaft was tight, square, and smelled like stale air and that same black slickness. My knees scraped metal. My breath echoed. Behind me, distant banging started, slow at first, then closer, like something was learning the shortest path. I hit a spinning fan and jammed my wrench into it, sparks screaming into the dark as blades snapped and fell away. I dropped through another shaft, tumbled into a storage room, and finally let myself check my suit gauges. Oxygen was lower than it should have been. The lights on my chest panel flickered red, like the suit couldn't decide if I was alive or not. From there, I found the server room. Rows of racks blinking green, and black oil dripping from them in slow, steady tears. I stepped inside, and the main terminal lit up. It spoke in a crewmate's voice. Distorted, glitching, but familiar enough to turn my stomach. It said things that sounded like warnings and invitations at the same time. Like it knew what I needed to hear to come closer. Cables snaked around my ankle. They tightened, not fast, but with that patient, confident pressure of something that doesn't worry about time. I cut them with a knife I didn't remember picking up, black fluid spraying out, hot against my glove. I backed out and welded the door shut, blue arc light filling the corridor while smoke curled around my helmet like breath from a second mouth. When the weld cooled, I stood there listening. The ship groaned. Not like settling metal. Like something inside it adjusted, recalculated, and kept going. And that's when I understood the worst part. It wasn't just broken. It was metabolizing. Once I accepted that, the whole ship made sense in the worst way. Every system was just another organ. Doors didn't jam, they clenched. Consoles didn't fail, they lied. And the only thing it wanted from me was time. I tried the last escape pod anyway, because hope makes you stupid. The wheel fought me, then the hatch finally gave, and inside was nothing but writhing black mass. Like the pod had been packed with wet wiring. That was when urgency stopped being an alarm and became a decision. If I left, I'd be carrying it to whoever picked me up. I armed myself the only way a freight officer can. I pried open the security cage, found a rivet gun, taped a flashlight to it, and watched grainy monitors of lower decks flooding. Somewhere along the way, black veins became oil, and I realized my suit wasn't just protecting me anymore. It was starting to claim me. Subscribe if you want the rest of this case file and the ones that come after, because the detail most people miss is how quickly getting out turns into making sure it can't follow. I triggered the reactor self-destruct and went out through an airlock with an EVA pack. Walking the hull by mag boots in total silence. I chipped ice off the manual cargo release wheel and cranked it open. The bay vented like a scream with no sound, and the biomass froze into glittering shards as it got dragged into vacuum. Then the reactor went white. The ship tore itself apart behind me. My opinion? The real horror wasn't the creature. It was the fact someone labeled it Project Mimic and shipped it anyway. If you ever feel your environment gets subtly wrong, don't negotiate with that feeling. That's how you end up making my choice, too late and alone.